enlighten us about the future of banking, we are fortunate to have among us a highly learned speaker, a seasoned banker, recipient of multiple doctorates from leading universities of the world, including PhD in Global Governance by European University, Doctorate of Laws by Washington College. In addition to the most coveted degree, he is a member of Indian Chartered Accountant Institute of India, New Delhi. He has been named as the best CEO in the Middle East, world leader business person, and a recipient of coveted the Galland's Excellence Award as a phenomenal banker, a regular commentator on international finance in global media outfits such as BBC, CNN, Fox, and Bloomberg. He is Group Chief Executive Officer of Doha Bank, and in his tenure, he has transformed Doha Bank as one of the best performing banks in the Middle East region. I'm sure we all know this, none other than Dr. R. Seetharaman. When our chairman given me the task to introduce Dr. R. Seetharaman ji, he gave me his website link. I opened the website, looked for 5 minutes, again looked for 5 minutes, and again looked for 5 minutes. I could not think from where to start and where to begin. It's like an ocean of website, so much of awards, so much of coveteds he had. I don't know where to begin. But his office came to my rescue. They presented me his very short profile, which is very handy for me, and removed my all task. To welcome Dr. R. Seetharaman on stage, may I request our Vice Chairman, Meenakshi Sundaram, to present a floral bouquet. Ladies and gentlemen, please join your hands in welcoming Dr. R. Seetharaman for his talk on Future of Banking in 2020.
The Management Committee members of the Bahrain Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, other distinguished fellow members, fellow speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure and privilege for me to be an integral part of my own fraternity. I was here in 2009, January. That was a defining moment for the global financial crisis. I have Srinivas Vempa is here. We were doing a syndication deal way back in 2007. I was in China on 8th of August 2007. 10th of August, Doha Bank has set in to sign the agreement with 26 banks from 13 countries. Vempa was the coordinator from GAB. I flew 13 hours from Shanghai after the inauguration. 8 is a lucky number for Chinese, as you know. It was a long flight, 14 hours. I landed. Visibly, the world was shaken when Bear Stearns refused to honor. BNP was exposing clearly the default. The signing ceremony was scheduled at 10 o'clock. I was in the CNBC London. The anchor, Louisa Bojan, scared me. In fact, today morning, Srinivas was telling me that he saw the interview as well. She asked me, do you know the story? I read it in the Financial Times on the flight, but I didn't know the gravity of what exactly likely to happen. So it was test to the overall credibility of the changing market dynamics and also credibility of the institutions where I belong. Me and my chairman were getting set on the day, and I said, I'll go for this interview. She really scared me, and what she said was conceptually clear. The deal was done. The deal was done to professional perfection thanks to GAB and the rest of the banks. We procured the money. Within 10 days, the dynamics were different in terms of credit default swap rate, and the pricing was quite exponential. The world has changed. It's not confined to Bear Stearns. It's not confined to Lehman Brothers, which leveraged 78 times. We are all qualified accountants. We know the gravity of balance sheet management. And a financial institution has to have a very strong discipline and governance to ensure when you confine yourself as a public finance, the governance and transparency and professional perfection should be the trust and confidence which global community repose on. Extraordinary turn of events. When I was here in 2009, just a beginning. October 2008 was imperfect when the International Monetary Fund. September was a starting point for Lehman Brothers collapse. The world at large was visibly setting the consumer confidence, establishing capital contributions from the exchequer, ensuring, guaranteeing the deposits. Consumer protection is set in, whether it's credit card or otherwise. Globally, there's a reorganization in terms of structural finance. Financial economies are still converting as real. Real economies are redefining the scope and performance. Communism, socialist pattern has changed. Capitalism is alterating its form and substance. That's why you could see President Obama was setting new kind of discipline to see they contribute the capital within the prescribed time. They have to repay. The institutions who have endangered their stress test, the solvency has to redefine the rules of the game. Eventually, they were repaying it, whether it's Citibank or JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley. It's not confined to America alone. Investment banks have defrauded. They issued gilted AAA certificates globally. Institutional investors as well as high net worth individuals have reposed confidence in those institutions, certified by rating agencies. Investment was on. They were let down. There's an absolute distress in the financial service. It transcended borders. Crossing transatlantic is not new for us to see. Northern Rock was in trouble. RBS, after the merger with ABN AMRO, was in trouble. Today, we have seen the crisis has moved from one phase to another phase. What we started as a liquidity crisis moved as a funding crisis. Funding crisis has moved into a solvency crisis, and it becomes a sovereign crisis. Countries like the United States, who have got huge trust and confidence in terms of overall governing leadership, they could print money, improving the liquidity, improving the money supply, rather. They could issue notes. That's not the real recovery. That's not the real growth. Improving liquidity inflated the stock market. Stock markets were bubbling world over. Again, the hot money was transcending borders, including emerging markets. Emerging markets were completely deprived in 2008. World over, there was panic set in. Markets were crashing, collapsing, quantitative easing. Number one, number two, number three, through open market operations, buying the long-term mortgages, issuing a debt paper has improved the overall consumer confidence. But is it a complete recovery? In my dictionary, unless you set a universal standard in terms of accounting, valuation, securitization, you're not going to redefine the game. What we started as a global issue has to be unified in terms of functions. Again, there has to be a convergence in terms of transparency and governance. A long way to go. Politics and economics is not converging in many parts of the world. Look at today, Europe. An absolute design error. While the monetary policy is centralized, in large Europe, as set in by Maastricht criteria, set in discipline in terms of deficit financing, set in discipline in terms of GDP to gross debt, have been breached. That's precisely the reason why Greece has cropped up in 2010, It's not confined to Greece alone. There is a contagion impact. You have seen Greece, Portugal, Italy, Spain's. Huge amount of political alignment. Monetary policy and fiscal policy has to align to make sure you have sustainable fiscal consolidation. Long way to go. It was not confined to developed economy alone. You have realized inclusive growth has to come. You need to bring in emerging markets into perspective. Incrementally, they were adding over 60% of the global productivity and performance. These economies have got a say in the decision-making and global governance. That's precisely the reason why G7 has become G8, G8 has become G20, which was the commencement of G20. April 2009, you had London. There was a convergence of politicians of all the 20 countries, including Saudi Arabia. India was playing its role as a dominant partner. China, again, second largest economy, has got a significant role to play. The world at large is still reeling under pressure to define the global problem. Trillions of dollars have been defrauded in terms of offshore. There's nothing as offshore. These are tax evasion centers. When it comes to transparency, everything is onshore. Offshores are designed to deliver, to defraud the public. You need to set in universal standard in terms of measurement mechanism so that global governance comes into real order. The reason why I'm saying banking will survive, whether banks will survive in 2020, the backdrop is economics. Banking is an integral part of the overall public makeup. The global momentum still at stage. Last month there was a spring meeting in Washington. What does it say? It says clearly the global output will move from 3.7 to 3.9% next year possibly. This year, 3.7%. Advanced economies still grossly underperforming. 2.2 to 2.3%. America can do between 2.8 to 3%. United Kingdom, austerity and value creations are mutually exclusive. Somehow they got the convergence right. Unemployment is coming down. Foreign direct investment is coming in. Housing market is recovering. Clearly, there's a governing evidence. They can do 2.9% this year, possibly. They will come down next year, 2.5%. This is IMF dictum. Japan. When America can print money, Japan can also print money. That's what they realized. Abenomics was invented in 2012. It was a political change. The predicament was quite severe. Technical recessions. Inflation was not there. Buying power was not there. So open market operation again. Trillions of dollars, rather, yen was printed. And it was flooded in the market. You could see yen was weakening. Export was on. The economy was reviving. Inflation was coming through as targeted. So printing money was not exceptional. America has done. The housing market is recovering. Unemployment is in check and balance. Purchasing power parity is improving. The same logic holds good for European Central Bank. But alignment between politics and economics is a key. The design has to deliver functional ambit of making sure fiscal consolidation comes in is a key. Japan did it. They have been fairly successful. China has kept yuan at a fixed rate for years. They could sustain 30 years, double-digit growth. India, as a functional democracy, could play its role. Pure economic tricks dictates this country has to prosper better than ever. Provided politics and economics converge, transparency comes in, governance comes in. Politicians recognize they are public servants. Fiscal consolidation is an issue. Current account deficit is an issue. Inflation is an issue. Inflation outweighs growth, you have a stagflation. India has to go through huge reorganizations. Perhaps monetary policy can add value. Monetary policy alone cannot fix the issue. Fiscal policy and monetary policy has to converge to produce economic momentum. That's the world we're in. Emerging markets, as I said, inclusive growth, they're all responding to changes. When America said they will go for QE tapering last year in August, you've seen the reflection. Federal Reserve chairman, when he mentioned there is a possibility of bond buying programs, he's put to rest month by month, gradually. You have seen the deceleration in currency market, commodity market, bond market, property market. Emerging markets were reeling under pressure. China, India, Russia, Brazil, they were all in doldrums. Currency was degenerated, we have seen. That was the predicament under which the new central bank governor in India took the responsibility. Transformational inputs were set in. Can you change everything by monetary policy alone? The answer is no. So world at large, if you look at it, the bigger picture, emerging markets can do between 5.4 to 5.5%. China is still formidable. I was in China last week. We operate in 15 countries as a banker. And the Qatar government asked me to accompany them to sign regulatory alignment. They are promoting RMB, globalizing yuan as a currency. I have my operations in Hong Kong as well. I was meeting the Hong Kong monetary authorities. They're also keen on promoting RMB. That's the world we're in. But still, Chinese role in terms of global makeup is significant. Every time when I go, whether Beijing or Shanghai, it's a telling story for you to see. While it is setting socialistic principles, free market principles are very much visible. Many zones have been exponentially moving across to have productivity and performance. 7.5%, possibly. 7.7%, perhaps next year. India can do, provided political stability comes in. If there is a hung parliament, you have the reflection in terms of inflow of investments, deceleration of currency. The consequences, you don't want to think about it at this point. We wish fiscal consolidation comes in, convergence of politics and economics comes in. There's a law and order bringing transparency and governance. Brazil, perhaps they can do 1.7% this year, possibly 2.2 to 2.3% next year. Russia, how do you explain the current situation? As we speak, we have seen the downgrade from S&P. Just one notch to go to grow behind the investment grade. Annexation of Crimea has got a huge consequence in world order. Americans are resounding their political garment. Last week, Obama was in Japan, Korea, Philippines, Malaysia to enforce as a governing leadership. China has got its own stand in terms of political makeup. Enlarged China is a superpower. What we call as a Cold War can turn into a hot war. The world at large has to witness, perhaps, next round of confrontation. You call it as after World War II, whatever the number you want to prescribe, you can. That's the world. This is the complexity of the world. These are the dynamics which are driving the change. These are the changes which we need to factor, whichever be the business we are in. Banking is global. Banking is public. Whether you run a local bank or a private bank, it is global, it is public. You're all accountants. You know, more than the shareholders' money, it's a public deposit which drive the asset to shareholders' equity. Can have serious consequence in terms of public manifestation. And banking is not confined to local domain alone. This is the backdrop under which you look at the banking for 2020. The changes which we are seeing today is a change of the game. It's a game change. Institutions which recognize the change. Institutions which recognize the global order. Recognizing the political change which has got consequential impact in your global economics, regional economics, local economics, can converge to sustain. Sustain, that's a big word. Where boom or downturn, you have to set in consistency. Sustainability is the name of the game. Perhaps me belong to your fraternity, I can at least say your chartered accountant's capacity is second to none. Having got a responsibility over 10 years before, where boom or downturn, my graph was only ascending. Whether it's 2002 to 2007, as institutions, purely by recognizing the changes which are required. Somebody asked me, are you going to use the PowerPoint? I said, no. You did use last time. I said there were two parts. When it comes to leadership trait, there was a second part which was compartmentalized last time. I had to use some tools to show what was the perspective leadership is all about. Otherwise, the changes which I am feeling is what I am impacting in terms of policy makeup or functional ambit to make sure sustaining credibility comes in. That's the key. Financial markets are gambling grounds. Stock market, I said to you, when the currency got weakened, currency war crops up. Currency war creates trade war. I gave an example of Japanese yen. While the liquidity was transcending borders, inflating the world at large and inflating the stock market, currency was weakening in its own substance to have exports, and that was driving the change for economic momentum. So everyone was aspiring for weakening the position. Chinese were not revaluing it. Rupee was ups and down, highly volatile. Japanese yen, to export, they have to weaken the currency. That's precisely the reason Abenomics was set in. So currency war creates trade war. That's a reflection. The bond market is a function of multiple factors. Fixed income you accrue. The geopolitical makeup plays a bigger role. We have seen with Arab Spring visibly shaking in January 2011. I was in Bloomberg. It was on the day when I was confronting. I don't recognize anything other than profession. In 2009 was set in as reflecting version of Dubai in November. I was cornered again in multiple financial media. I was not afraid of saying the truth. Dubai will bounce back. A similar predicament was put in when Arab Spring. These economies were different from North Africa, whether Egypt or Tunisia. The reflection is very important for you to factor the geopolitical makeup into the functional ambit for financial market evolution. That has got a wider role in every part of the financial markets. Again, bond market, credit default swap rate. If the geopolitical makeup has been in fire, you can see borrowing cost goes up. Commodity market again is a function of the currency market again. When dollar get weakened, you hedge the risk by buying commodity futures. That's why when dollar gets weakened, oil price goes up. I was in New York. There was a famous anchor, Maria Bartiromo. Was it in 2007? I was telling, because I know the oil price is going to go up, dollar index was way below the moving average for the last 6 years at the time. I was predicting $100. She was questioning my wisdom. And I had a television interview exactly after 3 months when it crossed over 100. Today, Brent is quoting over 100. WTI, New-Mex is quoting over 100. Look at the reflection. The currency has got wider implications in terms of commodity market. If there is a dysfunction in terms of global governance or political framework, then gold will be the substitute. Gold is no more a commodity, it's a currency. It's convertible, negotiable instrument. That's the reflection we are seeing today. People go for funding into gold. This is the way the world is changing. So economics plays a big role. Politics and economics, if it converge, then you have financial stability. If it's not, irrespective of your functional makeup, take, for example, the Gulf states. $1.6 trillion makeup. How is it? Topping in the list is Saudi Arabia, $747 billion as GDP. Then comes UAE, $404 billion. Qatar comes with $210 billion. Kuwait comes with $188 billion. Oman comes with $84 billion. $29 billion is Bahrain. Sum it up. The fiscal surplus, current account surplus as a percentage of GDP is 20%, $369 billion. That's what IMF says last month. But if there is a dysfunctional makeup in terms of political alignment, the equation will change. Stock market will be highly volatile. Bond market will be different. The borrowing cost will change. That's what the reflection we have been experiencing. This is a crisis as well as an opportunity. This crisis has got huge opportunity. The financial crisis, which turned into a human crisis, was a bigger opportunity for us to be ethical and moral. This is what I said in United Nations on May 18th, 2012. Global governance, this is an opportunity for us to clean the system. Financial economies, as I said, has to convert as real. Real economies have to play a decent role in global governance, in decision-making body of the world. Whether IMF or World Bank or IBRD or United Nations. Rating agencies have to come to terms. They can't be fair with it. Still, we are fighting in terms of United States ceiling. Unless these factors are interconnected, you draw your business model confining to those values which are having long-term solutions. You don't aim for sustainability. Sustainability comes out of conviction and principle-centered long-term values. United Nations itself is setting a new kind of mission, which is expiring next year, UN Millennium Development Goals, which is very important. Today, financial institutions apart, any institutions have to have a corporate social responsibility, eradication of extreme poverty, gender equality, eliminating terminal diseases like HIV, maternity, prime health of mothers, child mortality needs to be arrested, environment sustainability more than anything else, bringing carbon neutral world. These are factors into your business modeling. 2020 will not be different if you don't sustain all these factors into your business model. As I said, any institution which is not having corporate social responsibility will have no public trust. The changes are cosmetics if you don't recognize this. Your performance is short-term if you don't recognize. The value system is degenerated with short-term gains. You can't sustain credibility. You don't make sure you don't deliver the goods. That's what you are confining yourself if you don't have committed vision for long term. Look at the changing dynamics in terms of global warming and climate change. Whose responsibility it is? Financial institutions like us have to have sustainable vision in terms of policies and procedures. When you lend or invest, that's the job bankers have to do. Buying money, selling money. You buy the money through public trust. When it comes to selling the money, you have multiple pockets to deliver. Your asset allocation model has to work. But if you don't aim at sustainability in terms of investment and lending, you don't sustain long-term performance. That were run on banks. Iceland was melted. You know it, during the crisis. Changing climate is a major issue for the world. You have seen the character depictions, rising temperature, rising sea levels, endangering species, carbon emissions between the developed world and developing world is a contentious issue. Kyoto Protocol was destroyed. Then Copenhagen, United Nations, climate change conventions are all been cosmetic exercise. Durban, COP18 in Qatar, COP19, I was in Warsaw last year, November. What was the outcome of it? Unless you build green economies, financial institutions in 2020 comes to terms to build the green economies, you don't sustain long-term values. Per capita emission in the region has been enormous. Per capita income is going up. Per capita carbon emission is also going up. So what are you adding to the world? How are you securing your children and grandchildren? How do you sustain value creations as a public-private enterprise? Think about it. That's the kind of change we are seeing. This is the backdrop of the world. The rest are all measurable. The rest are all manageable. The rest are all quantifiable. The changes which we are seeing in the global makeup, if it is not conceived, you cannot deliver a business model which is changing. There are changing business trends in market acquisitions. Again, globalization. What was once called as deregulation has become re-regulations. That's what the world is confronting today. The world at large today is re-regulating. What has happened to credit card? You're re-regulating. You have lending limits for retail. You have interest rate limits for retail. Credit card interest rates has been capped. What does it tell you? Free market dynamics like America is setting this universal standard. Because you have to protect the common man, not only man in the main street. Wall Street and Main Street has to converge in total terms. Technology drives the change, 24/7. Business process outsourcing, knowledge process outsourcing, drive the cost reduction. 2020 is not going to be an exception. If Standard Chartered or Citi can deliver a trade transaction for $1, obviously, I'm a $20 billion bank. I cannot say I'm not equal to the capacity of the balance sheet of Standard Chartered. I cannot service at $1 because my cost is prohibitive. You have to go to the business model of the same methodology. You have to also rationalize your framework. Your policies and procedures and process and workflows should all confine to synergistic business model in line with the global makeup, irrespective of where you come from, what your design is all about, global banking. Today, leave alone 2020. That's the change. That's the reflection we are seeing today. Customers are no more location-centric. They're information-centric. They are not product-centric. They're anytime, anywhere-centric. I ordered birthday cake sitting in New York, debiting my account through a commerce portal in Doha, and delivered the goods. Banking is global. You can't have customized products and say, this is the solution for you. Customer has got a choice. He is global. He is no more local. Your information technology should align to make sure your business modeling is global. What we started as a mainframe when I was studying my chartered accountancy has moved into client server, network. Today, it's mobility. According to Gartner, by 2018, 80% of the transaction will move from your digital palm to cloud. So how are you going to make it up? How are you going to create a network which is secured? Technology advances, you have to adopt the changes as well in terms of information security. Your SMS banking, web banking, mobile banking, GPRS, bank on wheel, mobile computing, all have to converge with universal standards. The business model itself, keep the intellectual assets within you, peripherals completely outsource. Not an option if you have to be rationalizing your mechanism. Your branch network should be a center for negotiation and decision making, not for transaction-based processing. The digital advantage can give you the customer the convenience, and customer has got multiple points by which he can come in anytime, anywhere, and he can do the transactions, whether it's electronic bill payment presentment or e-trade or e-banking. He can. He should. His access devices are very many. Unless you converge and looking at a customer as one, you will fail. Institutions who have not defined their vision correct, the executions are faulty. The executions are faulty because you have not envisioned in tandem the changes which are happening in the world. You have seen plenty of case studies. Somebody is defrauding in the region, you know it. I don't want to name the institutions. Credit card, $45 million fraud. Auditors knows. Outsourcing company was completely intruded. I have a website called Doha Souk, as I mentioned. Somebody wants to buy 10 iPads. By intrusion deductions, we recognize the change. They called me at 10 o'clock. I said, stop the transaction. Within 5 minutes, the central bank governor called me. I said, go ahead, do the transactions. Let us catch him tomorrow on the delivery line. We'll talk to the... Because today is interconnected world. Next day morning, like a Scotland Yard, when this guy was about to pick up the material, whoever had intention to defraud was caught. That's the level of sophistications today we have. As and when the technology grows up, again, information security has to synchronize in terms of form and substance. Intrusion deductions, multiple firewalls, secure socket layers, all have to come into perspective to make sure that you fix the hole. Business model has to change. That's why if you do investment banking, you have a Dodd-Frank Act. Propriety, you are not a casino to gamble with public trust and money. You have to come to basic ethics. If you're a trader, behave. Set in governance principle. Institutions have to come to terms to set in a universal standard in terms of governance. Those are not options. Those standards have to have empirical evidence for us to see that is tested, proven, and consistent in terms of accuracy. Unless the standards are visualized in function, patterns, process, procedures, workflows, you're going to fail the institution. Online, real time. So you have to groom the environment to become real time. You have to groom the mindset of people who are engaged in intellectual assets, have to come to terms in continuous mission of professional education. Not an option. That's a change. We have seen the crisis has revealed so many useful missions for us to clean the system. That's why I said in the United Nations, this crisis is an opportunity. What this crisis is telling you, behave. Financial institutions should behave. Ethically, morally, you have to protect every stakeholders. Don't do gambling. Do basic banking. That's why Dodd-Frank. Again, Walker's rule is what? You have a limit. You play with public money. Investment banks, you have seen, many investment banks have been put to test. Their survival was intermittent. Business model is changing. It's a game change, as I said. It's not only changing business model, the risk alignment has to change. The enterprise risk integrations, we as accountants should recognize the risk is not confined to physical risk alone. It's digital risk, it's operational risk, it's market risk, which I mentioned, it's liquidity risk. Again, counterparty risk. How do you know the supply chain is going to perform? You know the customer. Do you know his supply chain? How it is interconnected? Do you know his business model in interconnected terms? Because his business is global. He may perform well. Today, centralized information intelligence are being shared today to make sure these informations are authentic enough, tested, validated, and ensure his global makeup is functional, not dysfunctional. To have relationship. Otherwise, how do you lend? That's a changing model. Look at the region itself. Trillions of dollars have been set in for urban development. This year alone, $445 billion has been the fiscal framework, budget, in our language, we as accountants. 143 billion is what Saudi Arabia is going to spend. Qatar is going to spend 72 billion. And again, when it comes to Oman, 85 billion. Kuwait, 72 billion. UAE, 86 billion. Bahrain, 24 billion. This is their budget. If these money are spent in airport, seaport, road, rail, it's a huge opportunity in terms of project finance or contract finance. The legal risk aligned, akin to the parties who are stakeholders, is huge. How are we going to make sure these contractors and subcontractors have got credibility? There's enough experience for us to learn in the last 5-6 years. It's not that trillions of dollars are going to be pumped by banks just like that. If you start measuring the risk, it's huge, whether it's contract or project space. The cost of fund dynamics have changed. The counterparty risk, as I said, is huge. The legal risk, I have seen instances where subcontractors' guarantees were encashed just like that without measuring the quantum merit. Project owners, sometimes significant portion of the project ownership comes from the government. They don't pay with the design changes, variations. We have evidence. So how are we going to make sure these changes which are happening in this space, whether 2020 or 2022, Expo or FIFA or other urban development, as I said, exponential growth in the region in terms of modernization is being pumped safely. The issues remains measurable risk. These risks should be understood, not in terms of direct, but indirect as well. While we say technology and business process, you have a huge operational risk, the credit risk has got a bigger dimensions to recognize in global pursuit of banking. It's not easy to lend money. I asked my guy, I come from a background of accountancy. Though my profession was accountancy, my passion was more towards technology. Those who knows my career, they know. I want to make sure my kitchen is good, so irrespective of my ambience, the waiters, whether they are beautiful or not, the visitors comes and eat. It's not the front end alone. For me, the back end comes in as a real order. If the house is good, the kitchen is good, anyone will come. You have a beautiful waiter and engrossing ambience. If food is not good, who is going to come to you? What's more important is to recognize the integration of people, process, and technology, and making sure your risk management, enterprise risk integration comes in real order. That's the key. While we fix the liquidity, that's why Basel II has become Basel III. The global financial institutions were grossly undercapitalized. Off-balance securitization was a bigger fraud. Trillions of dollars were hidden in terms of risk. They were not surfacing in real order. Otherwise, Lehman would not have appeared. These institutions, which are global, would not have lost their credibility. These institutions today, they are reorganizing in terms of stress test, going through the market deflections, factoring the solvency, and ensuring your capital adequacy comes in. That's why Basel III comes in. The capital buffer you need, measurable risk which you have to factor, ensuring you have solvency in the event of your domain failure in terms of lending or investments or market deflection has been factored into your capital. Play with as if it's your own personal money. That's what Basel III says. Governance comes in, transparency comes in, disclosure comes in. These are measurable tools. It's good that the region has been sound, profound in terms of combined capital adequacy. Not like the West. These rules are created to make sure you have sustainability comes in when it comes to new banking management, new order. These measurable risk has to be factored in terms of overall addiction and policies and procedures to ensure we don't slip on the risk management. Managing an institution today is interesting and exciting as long as you recognize the variables. As long as you recognize the regulatory alignment. As long as you recognize the changes. As long as you recognize the stakeholders. That's why capital adequacy rules have been changed. Transparency rules have been changed. Governance framework has been redefined. The diction is quite enlarged in real order. In terms of fertiling your institutions, you have to necessarily make sure a retail makeup is all about integrating customer as one, irrespective of the channel. When it comes to back-end integrations, ensuring you have procedures and process which are global benchmarks. When it comes to intellectual assets, you give the maximum weightage when it comes to human resource management. Succession plan is set in. It's not one-man show. I'm away. Today morning I was doing a video conference on my daily meeting. Irrespective, but perhaps the bank runs better when I'm away. The credit only can go to me. Simply because I set in the procedures and process which are self-balanced. That's the reality today. Ensuring delegation comes in. Responsibility and authority is synchronized. You are global in terms of intellectual makeup and ensuring standards which are set in are global. That's 2020. Then comes the rest of the alignment. Highest level of preference for governance. When the institution is turned into global, when the business model is becoming global, you set up a governance in transparent terms and global terms. And that's what a good institution should do. Global governance is a functional ambit of every single institution, which have got universal principles, or they go beyond their borders when it comes to decision making. You need to understand the dynamics of every single country where you operate. The regulatory framework which are unique in their prospects have to be recognized. Those are driven by macro and micro factors. Economics and banking has to converge. Those realities have to be understood in addition to conceptual banking. The rest are all measurable. You can increase the products. You can increase the channels. You can bundle the variety of products. You can brand yourself. You can globalize your options. You can bring in intellectual assets which are global. Those are opportunities which you can create. But sustainability in real order comes in once you recognize the changes and making sure you converge on the business model to develop a long-term vision. That's how the universal changes is all about. While we see the market opportunities, 2020 will have a bigger recognition, and you can sustain whichever be the business you are engaged in, whatever be the profession you belong to. If you drive and administer the changes which are global, which factor into your policies and procedures and process, and you create a business model which is enduring. Its values for all the stakeholders, its customers, its shareholders, its regulators, it is public at large, and also the co-owners or your staff. They are the important intellectual assets for you. These are the norms which you have to align and realign to make sure you get into professional perfection. Then your values are enduring. Then your profitability is coming. Productivity is sustainable. And again, your goodwill, more than anything else, your brand value. The single largest responsibility, somebody asked me 10 years before when I took the responsibility. My simple job is to protect the name, goodwill. Ensuring whatever I do, I have a long-term commitment. Ensuring the institutions gain long-term values. Ensuring credibility, you as an individual, you as a person, you as a professional, we as a collectively as a society. A good person can create good institution. Group of good institutions can create good society. Factoring social responsibility again. A good group of good society can create a good nation. A group of good nations can create United Nations. Not only the value systems is going to be enduring, it's going to be enlarging its commitments to make sure the succession operates with or without we as individuals. It is not discretionary. It is not an option. It is the value systems which you have to enlist within you. So the drive is within you. The change is within you. The leadership in you can make such borderless global citizenship. We have to break the barriers of citizenship. We have to break the barriers of territorial. We have to go beyond it to make sure whatever you do, you envision a committed alignment for a long-term 2020. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind attention.
Thank you, Dr. R. Seetharaman, for your wonderful insight to future of banking, which is worth noting and an eye-opener for all of us. And I'm sure members sitting here from banking industry and other industry would have relished this talk. Since we have the pleasure of having Dr. R. Seetharaman among us, we'll take some question and answers. Interested members who would like to raise some questions, utilize this opportunity.
RMB, the question is very clear. Where do you see RMB in 2020? The dollar is a universal currency. There's no second thoughts. What Chinese have engaged in is to recognize this opportunity to globalize RMB. Wherever there is a trade settlements, which China is formidable in global trade, they're suggesting trade settlement through RMB. That's as on date in global terms is 9 to 10%, perhaps by 2020 in my addiction. With the pace at which the economic momentum China is envisaging still is formidable. They may not be ranking like America in terms of GDP. They are closing the gap. If their global trade is incremental at a rate of 9 to 10%, which is likely, I would say 2020 they will have a market share of 25%, which is significant.
Yes. Morning, sir. We wanted to know essentially what do you think the future of investment banking is in Bahrain? Considering that Doha and Dubai seem to be growing well, and a number of banks here also seem to be coming down.
No, the region has been well positioned to do investment banking. There's no question about it. We have, as I said, it's one of the very important business model. Only it's a game change. The rules of the game has changed. Investment banks in the past were irresponsible. We have seen in the global makeup, not necessarily, I'm talking about Bahraini banks. We have seen the reflection in Islamic banks. We have seen the reflection in commercial investment banking operations. They all have gone through downturn. Majority of them. They have been recapitalized. Now the game change is sitting. New discipline for them when it comes to the overall professional business modeling. And I foresee there could be industry consolidation in terms of investment banks, but they have a huge, significant role to play with the affluence of the society. Sovereign funds is mushrooming. Look at the sovereign funds today. I mean, yesterday night, someone was showcasing the sovereign funds in the region. If 20% is your current account surplus, an average, if we enlarge it, 400 billion as an incremental current account surplus, even fiscal surplus, you take 7%, 5 to 7%. It's huge, it's multi-trillion. So investment banks, institutional investors will flourish, pension funds will come in. So you have huge opportunity to make it up. But you have to follow the new world order, new game change, and set in sustainable missions to establish credibility and create products and services.
Here. I think this question, probably all of us would be interested. Here, sir.
Okay.
This side.
This side, okay.
This side, okay. You mentioned a very good point that there should be a convergence between politics and economics, without which the growth in economy and does not arise. Now, looking at India, assuming a scenario that there is going to be a stable government with a majority in the parliament, where do you see rupee? Where do you see stock market? Where do you see India going? Thank you.
As I said, the pure econometrics dictates this century belongs to India. There's no question. As long as we manage it with the convergence of politics and economics. You have got a younger population. More than 55% of your population is less than 30. You have a huge consumerism. It's a real order. But we messed up in terms of bureaucracy, transparency, governance. We compromised. Everyone knows it. In the world order, today, foreign direct inflow is not there. British Virgin Islands has procured 78 billion. We procured, paltry 29 billion was the inflow last year. China has done over 700 billion. What is the reason? It's only the consumer confidence. Everyone knows you have to improve the investment climate. The non-resident force itself is a testimony today, globally, wherever they are engaged in few months' time, they could fix the whole partly. We are formidable in terms of inside and outside India. We know the solutions. We are helpless in terms of political convergence. And that's the issue. Our current account deficit is how much? 100 billion, we can easily fix it. Fiscal deficit is how much? He's targeting 4.8% of the GDP. Bring in all the unaccounted money around the world. Hoarded, defrauded, trillions of dollars. Bring it in. You see the consequence of your macroeconomic stability. Liberalize the investment climate. Create a window. If socialistic countries like China could create free market principles, create incentives for international investments. Don't retract your decisions which you have already given. Like, I can give you any examples. We made fool of ourselves in many occasions. So there is enough reasons to believe we can be optimistic. If there is a political stability, this country can reach its deserving meritocracy. It's a pity we lost our way. We were coming along. 14 years, 9% growth was not normal. And we have. You go to any economist, he will tell you how prosperous it can be. You have all the metrics which are well set in. Policymakers have to come to terms. recognize the functional democracy, we also have to understand the law and order, ensuring transparency and governance comes in to make sure international investments comes in. International investment is a key. Our debt papers are limited. Our foreign direct inflow is limited. I mean, look at this region. What's our bilateral trade? 170 billion. 170 billion is the bilateral net. We're buying oil, gas, petrochemicals. The export from India is very limited. Import is more. What if these countries have got understanding in terms of infrastructure investments with an exit strategy, a clear commitment in terms of exit strategy? Which government will not? And look at the class of Indians around the Gulf itself, 7 million people. So there's no reason why we cannot fix these issues. A good governance should set in the right kind of mission and vision to execute. The problems are measurable, manageable, controllable, deliverable to desired destinations which we aspire for.
We all are aware about the quantitative easing all around the world, which you also mentioned. By this question, I just wanted to check my notes with a learned speaker like you. Like Federal Reserve has accumulated a lot of US Treasury bonds on their balance sheet worth maybe $5 or $6 trillion.
That's right.
I'm constantly thinking one or two alternatives by which they will normalize their balance sheet. But what is your view? How are they going to normalize their balance sheet in due course of time once the situation is normalized in the USA? This is number one. Number two, I always wonder that UK is printing money, ECB is printing money, Japan is printing money, US is printing money. There used to be some norms during gold standard that there is a certain amount of gold to be deposited before you can print or something like that. So is there any measure or any internal discipline these countries have in terms of how much money new money they can create, or they can go an infinite way? Then what is the value of this paper in due course of time?
It's a very important question. It's very, very meaningful question. See, what's happening in the world today? Accommodative monetary policy is a tool. You can print money as a short-term solution. Special drawing rights banks are creating, central banks or monetary authorities are creating to improve the liquidity. But printing money is not the ultimate solution. What has happened is beyond definition. Now, this is like a patient. You inflate him with saline and hold him. The minute you remove the oxygen cylinders, he's going to die. Currency is a barometer. By printing money, we're weakening the currency. Purely, it's accommodative to support your trade and liquidity. We lost character in terms of global governance. That's what I said. I had a privilege of meeting Mr. Ban Ki-moon in 2010. I did mention to him, I said, you should stop this. You should stop this. We should have a policy. How can anyone can print the way they want it? Today, there's no challenge to US dollar. Still, it's universal currency in terms of political stability, in terms of functional makeup as a democracy, in terms of copyright or intellectual assets. I mean, it's a great constitution as such. People have got trust and confidence. And dollar they can print as much as they want. But how are you going to bring the fundamental makeup of stability? They have to reduce borrowing. They have to bring in stability in terms of development expenditure. Otherwise, you will not have a growth or employment. Capital expenditure has to go through. Cost has to be rationalized. Their borrowing has to come down if they have to sustain even AAA rating. There were many occasions in which that's being challenged. We all know. So this is a dichotomy in global governance. So that's why I said, if you ask me, the world has recovered, the answer is no. Its phase one was QE1. Phase two was when EU was setting its distraction in terms of design. Phase three is what you have seen. Now, who is growing now? Emerging market has taken a back seat. Their growth is marginalized now. India or China. China is also slowing down. We have seen 7.3% is what IMF says. But America is recovering. UK is recovering. So developed world are getting back in track in line with QE. But the minute QE tapering is going to be, that's why they want G20 as desired, they will go on in gradual fashion. They will not go and stop this overnight. Then the consequences in an interconnected, interdependent world is huge, because today, what's happening in one part of the world resonates in other parts. So in my dictionary, a long way to go in terms of getting the real growth, real order. And global growth is at stake by tampering with all this mechanism. Unless we create real economies, financial economies are going to endanger the solvency of real economies. I hope you get me. They have to convert as real. Instead, they are bubbling more. Real economies are marginalized. Why should, between June to August, currency in India should depreciate 18%? Why? It's only one single news, not even action. In FOMC, Federal Reserve then chairman, Ben Bernanke, said he's going to have cut down the bond buying programs. That consequence is what you have seen in all the emerging markets. So currency is a barometer. There should be a free market dynamics. If everyone is going to, then India has to get into the same accommodative monetary policy. They have to intervene the currency. Otherwise, the day is not far off. The day is, if this is not, there's no solution to it, then one country cannot be, or one or two countries cannot be a free market dynamics. Then you will be inflating for no reason. The interconnected world, the standards are universal. And world at large, that's what I said. Unless you set in universal standards through global governance, these missions are distorting the facts. Highly volatile world we are living in. It's gambling ground.